To Contemporary Black Voices, where we take on the most pressing problems confronting Black America. I'm the writer Fred, along with New York Times bestselling author Caleb Alexander, professor and author Dr. Sharon Michael Chadwell, and businessman and community leader Chris Dawkins. No doubt the most pressing problem confronting Black America in the last week is the United States Supreme Court decision overturning affirmative action in college admission for minority students, specifically aimed at Black Americans. In a 6-3 decision, that court just took this country back at least 50 years in their obvious attempt to finish the work started by disgraced and impeached President Donald Trump's Make America Great Again. The decision is a travesty against justice and laughable when they argued that the Constitution calls for a colorblind country. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson exposed the hypocrisy of the 6 justices that voted in the affirmative, and especially Clarence Thomas, who will be the subject of our hot topic following this segment of the program, when she wrote, "With Let Them Eat obliviousness, today the majority pulls the ripcord and announces colorblindness for all by legal fiat. But deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life." Usually, we Black Americans are used to white America challenging our struggles to equality in this country. Now we have another adversary, the Asians, who brought this suit to eradicate affirmative action. In the Students for Fair Admission, Inc. versus President and Fellows of Harvard College, a case initiated by the Asian Americans, they went after primarily the African American students whom they felt had the unfair advantage of rates in their applications for admission to universities.
Court would move in the direction that it did today. Why do you think that this is the right way to move forward on this?
Right. Well, I think this is a win for students all across America, because we shouldn't be judging students based on their race when we're deciding who gets into what schools. I think that I believe that your previous guest is mistaken in this regard, because I think that by getting rid of affirmative action, now we look at the individual student and what they've accomplished, and we can look at what barriers they've overcome. But we view them as an individual first and foremost, as opposed to just viewing them as a blob in an amorphous, larger racial group, as opposed to just under this new system, we get to view students for who they are as individuals. And I think that's a much better way to go forward on this topic.
You heard Booby's point there, though, that this now forces students, if they want the school to take into account race in some fashion or form, that they're going to have to now write about this.
Right. Well, I think that fundamentally, right, for most people, race is just a characteristic. It's sort of the way that your body manifests. I think that for some students that does play a role in how they experience the world, but for some students it doesn't. And I think that allowing them that option to express that in an essay, for instance, affords much more freedom, because race doesn't affect everybody the same way. And to just have a blanket policy where everybody's race is considered no matter what, I don't think that's appropriate, because it impacts different people in different ways. I find that a lot of these arguments oftentimes in favor of affirmative action are somewhat incongruous, because I've heard a lot of people that say, like, hey, affirmative action, it's a good way to overcome past discrimination. But in my experience, as an Asian American, I'm not exactly sure how that works for me, because it's much more difficult for Asian Americans to gain admittance to schools than for white students, for instance. And I don't think that you'll see in the past any instance of Asians discriminating against whites. So for me, that sort of just falls flat. I'm going to Brown next year, and I'm happy that the admissions officers at Brown took me for whatever reason. But it does make me feel a little bit uncomfortable knowing that in that admissions office, when they were deciding whether they were going to accept me, reject me, that they might have been considering my race, because I think that that's not something that I can control or that anyone can control. And I think that it's unfair to judge someone based on that, when there are really so many better ways to judge students based on their character, based on their accomplishments. Race, it's just how you're born, and you can't change it.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out.
Our fellow teammate on Contemporary Black Voices, Caleb Alexander, puts it bluntly. Affirmative action ended because Asian people believed that black people were occupying spaces that they did not earn. So let's turn to Brother Caleb to get this discussion started. Talk to us, Caleb.
And so, yeah, it's another case of people believing that black people occupy spaces that they should not be in. And so, just with everything this young man said on that video, just so much of it was wrong. So
Yeah.
just the idea, this is why history is important. This is why learning history is important, the history of this country. So you have these waves of immigrant groups that have come in later, post-civil rights. And so they don't understand the nature of the struggle. They don't understand what black people have gone through in this country to get us to where we are today. And so these people are coming in here and they are riding on the backs of what the blacks have had to struggle for. And so they black people, actually, we died to be in these institutions. We died to have access to the institutions. Right. And so so when you have these groups that come in and say, well, it shouldn't apply now, and they wouldn't be in these institutions or able to go to these institutions without black struggle, without what we did to be able to get there. And so that's my issue with that. That's why history is important. Learning the history of this country, and that's why Black Studies is important. And learning what we had to go through. That their ability to occupy, to exist in these spaces didn't come in a vacuum. It came off of black folks' struggle. And so instead of saying thank you, they want to challenge and take things away from us that we struggle for, that they now benefit from. That's my first point. So my other point is, it was just so perverse for the court to take a look at the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment and use the very clause that whose reason for being was to allow black people to occupy these spaces, to use that very same clause to deny black people the right to occupy these spaces.
Absolutely.
And that was a perversion in the worst sense. And so I'll wait and
that young man made a statement, and I think I'm gonna call out Sharon. I think she's gonna shoot him all the way down, because he made the statement. We have a hard time getting into these universities. Sharon, you want to respond to that?
To the listening audience, we have been bamboozled. The gentleman and also the person in the plaintiff, Mr. Wayne, cried wolf. And overall, we've just been hoodwinked. So before I ask Carl to put up some stats for me, as of 2022, in the U.S. Census, white people make up 75% of the population, okay? Black people make up 13% of the population. Asians make up 6% of the population, and then Hispanics make up about 19% of the population, and then everybody else falls under into the single digits. So, Carl, please indulge me and put up Princeton. Okay, well, this is MIT. As you can see, this is their enrollment. This is their enrollment that's on their school webpage. As you can see, wow. White folks make up about 30% of the student population. Asians make up 18% of the population. And then you have those international students, I haven't figured out who all those are, make up about, 29%? But black folks only make up, they're not even on the chart. Who's on the green? Those are Hispanics. So black folks are not even on the chart big enough to even get a number associated. But Asians are being discriminated. Next, who we got? Princeton or Harvard? So MIT, Harvard. Princeton. Well, as Carl is putting that up, a similar phenomenon is occurring where Asian students are in the 20 percentile of enrollment at both Princeton and Harvard, whereas Black folks are in the low teens or single digits. But again, based on his argument, they're being discriminated against. So I don't think this was never about race. This was never about race. You have to remember, Abigail Fisher at UT Austin, her case didn't make it. And so that attorney attached himself to this one because the Asian community predominantly, I think, and from all the names, it looks like mostly Chinese, but the Asian community had the backing of Harlan Crow.
Yeah.
Now you got to remember that name because that's Clarence Thomas's benefactor, if you will. So they attached themselves to that one and pushed this thing all the way through. And you also have to remember that the Republicans have been playing a severe, long game to get rid of not only affirmative action, all the other cases, that all the other laws that have been passed over the years, they have been trying to get rid of all of that. So this was more about getting rid of laws versus really a true argument on race.
Chris, I turn to you, brother.
I don't know that you want to. Okay. Look, my situation is I agree with everything that has been said on the panel. However, who is surprised by what the decision is? And with us knowing, us being blacks, knowing that, what were we doing to prepare for it? Now we're crying about this, that this has happened. And again, we're going to ask the white community or somebody else or the Supreme Court or whatever, what they're going to do about it. Well, I think we do need those people who are in that space to be able to address this. However, as a larger community, we need to work together to be able to decide how we're going to combat with this, but within our own confines. We need to get back to something like a Black Wall Street or something like that that we can do that is just us, that we're going to do by ourselves. Because I think that what's going to happen is that we, the whole country, is going to be able to see that this country has discriminated against black folks. Okay, number one. The 14th Amendment was there to try to correct that. Now this particular court is going way off the rails in trying to make these decisions. And especially after I looked at a program yesterday and they were saying that there's no standing. You have to have a standing. Who was hurt in these situations? This guy who we just saw, I don't think he ever even applied from us.
Yeah, I think he did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where did he apply to and get turned down?
Harvard. And he got into Brown.
Got it to Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, the way I'm looking at all of this is that affirmative action, if we think about the reason why it came about, was to make some corrections behind Jim Crow.
Correct.
Reconstruction, and basically black folks, okay? Helping black folks, trying to equalize employment, school admission, etc.
And let me stick a pin there real quick.
Let's hold up there. Let's come back with your point.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to take a break here at Contemporary Black Voices. We'll be right back with you and to continue this very necessary and important discussion.